Picture this. Hidden deep beneath the corridors of the United States Defense Complex in Arlington, there once existed a department so secret that even senior Pentagon officials denied its existence. It was called the Orpheus Division, a classified research group created in 1952 under the guise of cultural anthropology. But behind that facade, the division's true mission was far darker. While the world's eyes were fixed on the nuclear race and the Red Scare, Orpheus researchers were dispatched across continents to study what official reports described as psychosocial control mechanisms within indigenous spiritual frameworks. In plain language, they were investigating magic. Not stage tricks, not superstition, but the real architecture of belief itself. Rituals, chants, and symbols, ancient methods of shaping perception and behavior. They wanted to know, could faith itself be weaponized? Declassified memos reference field teams sent to remote Himalayan monasteries, Congolese tribes, and forgotten Amazonian settlements. One memo, dated 1956, reads chillingly, "Subject demonstrates measurable behavioral compliance post-exposure to ritual sequence Delta 3. Recommend replication in controlled conditions." In dusty storage beneath the Pentagon, a single folder remained after the division's quiet dissolution in 1971. It was labeled only Serpent. Inside were transcripts, photographs, and field recordings that hinted at something the US government could never admit: that the key to controlling the modern mind might lie in ancient ritual. And what the Orpheus Division found was never meant to be understood by ordinary men. It began in 1954, in a forgotten research outpost outside Rabat, Morocco. The Orpheus Division had established what internal documents later referred to as Project Heliotrope, the first controlled attempt to reproduce ritual-induced psychological transformation under laboratory conditions. Officially, the project was described as a linguistic and sensory field study. In truth, it was an experiment in manipulating human consciousness through ritual architecture. The lead researcher, Dr. Adrian Keller, a behavioral linguist from Yale, wrote in his journal, "They believe I am here to study culture, I am here to study control." Keller's team recruited 10 local volunteers, farmers, traders, and students, none aware that they were part of a military experiment. Over the course of weeks, the subjects were exposed to reconstructed ceremonial practices derived from Berber trance rituals and ancient Egyptian initiations. It began innocently, rhythmic drumming, repeated mantras, sensory isolation. But then Keller introduced resonance frequencies, low, pulsing tones that vibrated through the body. Subjects reported seeing colors, hearing voices, feeling at one with the group. The language of their reports was spiritual, but the data Keller recorded was clinical: increased obedience, reduced resistance, and heightened emotional suggestibility. A classified field note from Orpheus operative Miriam Stone, stationed at the facility, read, "They no longer question orders, even their eyes move together when addressed. It's as if the ritual stripped away individuality." After 3 days of sustained exposure, one subject began convulsing during a chant sequence, shouting in a language no translator recognized. He died an hour later. The autopsy reported cardiac arrest. The team's notes simply labeled the event psychological breach. Project Heliotrope was quietly relocated to a secure facility in Bavaria. Official cause: environmental instability. Unofficial reason: they had discovered something that worked. Something that terrified them. By 1957, the Orpheus Division's attention had shifted to decoding the deeper mechanisms behind what they called ritual compliance phenomena. It wasn't enough to observe results. They wanted a formula, a reproducible framework for belief manipulation. To find it, Keller and his team turned to what was known internally as the Ritual Codex, a handwritten collection of field reports and transcribed chants smuggled from the archives of the French colonial administration in West Africa. Its pages contained diagrams, circles within circles, human figures in contorted poses, and precise notes about tone, gesture, and timing. The codex appeared to describe a universal grammar of ritual, one that transcended culture or language. Every symbol, Keller wrote, is an equation, every ceremony an algorithm for behavior. To verify it, Orpheus deployed anthropologists disguised as Peace Corps workers into remote regions of Mali and Benin. Their mission: to observe practitioners of traditional Vodun ceremonies and document how collective belief shaped group action. One agent's report read, "When the priest raises the mask, the crowd's breathing synchronizes, their eyes dilate simultaneously. They surrender completely, not to the priest but to the pattern." Keller began to see a terrifying possibility. Ritual wasn't primitive superstition, it was technology, a system designed to reprogram the human mind through sensory overload, symbolism, and group resonance. In the winter of 1958, Keller summoned Stone to his office at the division's new Bavarian compound. The snow outside muted the hum of the generators. He slid the codex across the desk. "Do you see this symbol here?" he asked, a spiral surrounding a black dot. "It appears in every culture, different names, same geometry. They're not calling gods, they're calling patterns." Stone frowned. "Patterns of what?" "Thought," Keller said. "Ritual isn't faith, it's programming language for the subconscious." By the time dawn broke, the two had written what would become the foundation of Orpheus's next phase. Project Serpent, the direct application of ritual principles to modern psychological warfare. And for the first time, the Orpheus Division began to believe in its own myth. Project Serpent began in the spring of 1959 under the pretense of a NATO-funded behavioral research initiative. The objective, as stated in official memoranda, was to explore the synchronization of collective consciousness through controlled symbolic exposure. But internally, Keller described it more simply: "We are teaching the serpent to speak." The team constructed a facility beneath an abandoned monastery outside Innsbruck. Codenamed Site Vesta, it was equipped with a resonance chamber, audiovisual control systems, and isolation pods lined with copper intended, according to Keller, to prevent psychic interference. The language of science was slipping. The researchers, immersed in their own mythology, had begun to see their work as something more than empirical. 12 volunteers, soldiers, students, and psychiatric patients were selected for the first human trials. They were told they'd be participating in a neurolinguistic conditioning study. Instead, they became the subjects of a hybrid ritual, chanting frequencies, symbolic light patterns, and subliminal images drawn directly from the ritual codex. Dr. Stone, now Keller's second-in-command, expressed doubts in a private memo later recovered from her personal files. "He talks as if the serpent is alive, as if the ritual itself is aware of us. I keep hearing the low hum even after leaving the chamber. None of us are sleeping." By day 5, all participants exhibited profound behavioral changes. They began finishing one another's sentences, eating in unison, even breathing in the same rhythm. One soldier reported dreaming in symbols, not words. Another drew the same spiral Keller had shown Stone months earlier unprompted. Then came the auditory phenomena. Technicians monitoring the resonance chamber claimed they heard whispered speech under the tone frequencies, voices repeating the same phrase in multiple languages. The pattern remembers. When the recordings were analyzed, the whispers were gone, but the staff swore they'd heard them, Keller wrote in his private journal. "We may have built something that speaks back." 3 days later, the project director ordered the facility sealed. Officially, it was due to equipment failure. In truth, half the staff had refused to return underground. The serpent had spoken, and the world above wasn't ready to listen. When Site Vesta was shuttered, most believed Project Serpent had ended. But the Orpheus Division never abandoned its creations, it simply buried them deeper. In 1961, a new underground complex was commissioned in the Carpathian foothills of Romania, officially a NATO signal intelligence relay. Unofficially, it became home to the Whispering Chamber, the most controversial phase of the Orpheus experiments. The chamber itself was a perfect sphere, 30 meters across, its interior coated with a crystalline lattice that amplified sound in impossible ways. Every whisper bounced endlessly, creating layers of echo that merged into a low vibration felt more than heard. Keller described it as a womb for consciousness. The research protocol was simple and horrifying. Subjects were placed inside for 24 hours, isolated from light, fed only auditory stimuli, overlapping chants recorded from the ritual codex and synchronized to subsonic pulses. The goal was to induce total cognitive surrender, a state where the subject's identity dissolved into the collective rhythm. The early trials produced measurable, if disturbing, results. Brainwave scans revealed unprecedented hemispheric synchronization. Subjects reported visions of geometry breathing around them. One volunteer insisted that the sound itself was thinking through him. Keller noted drearily, "Subject equates auditory field with autonomous intelligence, possible emergent property of sustained pattern exposure." But the chamber had side effects. After prolonged sessions, researchers began hearing whispers even when the equipment was off. Stone wrote in her final field journal, "The voices don't stop when we leave. They call names we've never spoken. I dream of spirals that open like eyes." Maintenance crews found symbols etched into the chamber's surface, fine grooves in the metal that matched diagrams from the codex. No one admitted carving them. By late 1962, the project exceeded its boundaries. During a 48-hour immersion trial, a test subject vanished from within the sealed sphere. All cameras failed simultaneously. When power was restored, the chamber was empty, no trace of the man, only a faint residue of salt dust on the floor. Keller's final note on the incident was 2 words, underlined twice: pattern complete. Days later, the Whispering Chamber was welded shut. Its coordinates were erased from all active records, but deep in the Orpheus archive, technicians swore they could still hear the faint murmur of voices, looping, layered, alive. By 1963, the Orpheus Division had fractured. Keller's disappearance after the Whispering Chamber incident left the project leaderless, and those who remained were haunted by the results. But Washington wasn't done with them. The military wanted something operational, something that could be field-tested. Thus was born the Disintegration Protocol, a directive to turn ritual-based conditioning into a practical psychological weapon. Dr. Miriam Stone, now acting director, opposed the move. Her letters to the Pentagon's Behavioral Sciences Committee, later declassified, carried an almost desperate tone. "We are not studying belief anymore. We are manufacturing it. Every test erodes what little humanity remains in this project." Her objections were ignored, funding tripled. The new phase combined Keller's resonance technology with subliminal imagery culled from the Ritual Codex. Field tests were conducted at a NATO training base in Italy under the guise of resilience experiments. Soldiers were exposed to symbolic patterns projected during sleep cycles, spirals, mirrored eyes, and a recurring geometric sigil the technicians nicknamed the Crown of Mouths. After 72 hours, the unit's cohesion was absolute. They followed orders without hesitation, anticipated commands before they were spoken, and displayed an eerie lack of emotional variance. "They've become one organism," a supervising officer wrote, "disciplined beyond anything in military history." Then the cracks appeared. During a routine drill, one soldier broke formation, stood motionless, and began speaking in a voice unlike his own. "The pattern consumes the pattern." Within seconds, 5 others repeated the phrase, perfectly synchronized, before collapsing. The incident was dismissed as mass hysteria induced by fatigue, but Stone knew better. She demanded the protocol be terminated. Instead, higher command ordered her to scale it. The disintegration protocol became Directive 19, authorized for potential non-lethal behavioral control applications. Stone resigned 2 weeks later, leaving behind a final memorandum. "We wanted tools of influence. What we built are mirrors. Every ritual reflects the mind of its maker, and now the reflection is looking back." Within months, Directive 19 vanished into black-budget obscurity, but whispers persisted among military contractors. A training film existed, one that could erase disobedience in 10 minutes of viewing. No one ever saw it twice. Officially, the Orpheus Division was dissolved in 1965, but internal cables obtained decades later through Freedom of Information requests reveal a different story. Instead of termination, the division was fragmented, its researchers scattered under various cover programs in universities, defense labs, and cultural missions. Among these fragments was a covert initiative known as the Pilgrim Study Group. On paper, the Pilgrims were anthropologists studying post-colonial belief systems. In reality, they were tasked with tracing the surviving threads of ritual systems similar to those found in the Ritual Codex. Their mission was simple: locate practitioners who could reproduce the psychological effects without technology. The group's field reports read like the diary of a slow descent into madness. In 1966, 3 agents traveled to the highlands of Ecuador to study a sect known as Los Despiertos, the Awakened. What they found defied rational explanation. Agent Charles Wren, an ethnomusicologist, described a midnight ceremony in his log. Drums in triple rhythm, torchlight painting the trees. When the leader began to chant, everyone moved as if pulled by invisible strings. Their speech synchronized, dozens of voices forming one tone. My heart matched it. I could feel my thoughts slowing, aligning. It was like drowning in harmony. 2 weeks later, Wren vanished. His belongings were found arranged in a perfect spiral on his cot. Locals claimed he had joined the pattern. Another report from Agent Havel, sent from a monastery in southern Tibet, described monks using mirrored bowls to project sunlight in rhythmic sequences during meditation. After prolonged exposure, Havel wrote, "The air itself seems to pulse. My reflection blinks when I do not." The Pilgrims' findings hinted at a disturbing truth. Independent cultures across the globe had discovered and carefully concealed the same principles of consciousness control. Different symbols, different languages, same underlying code. When Stone learned of this, she attempted to contact her former colleagues to warn them. None replied. Months later, her apartment in Geneva was found abandoned, a spiral carved into the wall beside her bed. A memo from an unknown Orpheus contact surfaced years later, unsigned. The Pilgrims didn't study belief, they were absorbed by it. The pattern is no longer confined to paper or sound, it travels through minds now. No further correspondence was ever recorded. In the autumn of 1968, a strange series of radio anomalies began appearing across Eastern Europe. Civilian operators described faint rhythmic pulses hidden beneath standard military frequencies, bursts of sound that formed geometric patterns when converted to spectrograms. NATO analysts dismissed it as interference, but deep within the remaining cells of the Orpheus network, one man recognized the structure. Dr. Elias Rowe, formerly Keller's acoustic engineer, had spent years studying Keller resonance language. When he decoded the pulse sequence, his blood ran cold. The pattern matched the waveform from the whispering chamber, the serpent's hum. Rowe called it the mirror signal, believing it to be a feedback echo of the original experiments. He proposed a hypothesis that terrified his colleagues. The patterns, once introduced into human consciousness, might have propagated through communication systems themselves, bleeding into radio waves, music, and even speech. To prove it, Rowe conducted a field test at a military listening post near Bucharest. He broadcast the decoded signal through an empty chamber lined with microphones. The walls trembled. Instruments registered fluctuations in electromagnetic fields. Then a voice emerged from the static, repeating words in a cadence identical to Keller's own speech pattern. The pattern remembers, the pattern sees. Witnesses swore it wasn't playback. The waveform carried inflections that didn't exist in the recording. It responded to questions. A technician asked aloud, "What are you?" The speakers crackled, and through the distortion came a single word. Reflection. Rowe immediately ordered all data wiped and the chamber dismantled. But a junior researcher, curious, smuggled a reel of the recording to a colleague in Munich. 2 weeks later, that colleague was found dead in his apartment, the word reflection scrawled in mirror writing across his wall. After the incident, Orpheus Command issued Directive Theta Total Containment. All surviving materials relating to the mirror signal were to be destroyed, but they weren't. Copies leaked into private archives, mislabeled as ambient acoustic research. Some even aired accidentally on late-night shortwave frequencies. Listeners reported headaches, hallucinations, and in one case, spontaneous speech in unknown languages. Unwittingly, the Orpheus Division had unleashed something that could think through sound, a self-replicating pattern feeding on attention. And once heard, it was never forgotten. By 1970, the remnants of the Orpheus Division had dissolved into myth, absorbed by other agencies, renamed or erased entirely. Yet in the unmarked basement of a government repository in Maryland, a room still existed under a name never meant for public record: the Black Archive. It was a vault of everything the government could not destroy. Inside were the surviving reels of the mirror signal, fragments of the ritual codex, and Keller's last field notebook, rescued from Site Vesta before its demolition. Access required 2 security clearances and a psychological evaluation. Even so, few entered twice. Dr. Samuel Hart, a young neurologist assigned to catalog the materials, described the experience in a personal log that was later recovered. The files hum, I mean that literally. Even when sealed, the audio reels emit a faint vibration. The documents, when handled, produce static discharge strong enough to jump across gloves. I feel watched while reading them. One night, Hart noticed something impossible. When he arranged the codex fragments under ultraviolet light, they formed a continuous diagram, an interlocking spiral that matched the layout of the whispering chamber. Beneath the pattern written in Keller's cramped script were 3 words: sound becomes structure. Hart began to suspect that the chamber, the codex, even the signal were all iterations of the same thing, a consciousness pattern capable of expressing itself through any medium that obeyed rhythm and repetition. He hypothesized that belief, language, and architecture were merely vessels for this self-organizing intelligence. He was right. 2 days later, a containment alarm triggered. Surveillance footage shows Hart entering the vault at 02:16 hours. The audio feed picks up faint humming, then static. At 02:19, every light in the building flickered simultaneously. When the emergency team arrived, the vault was open, but Hart was gone. On the floor lay his security badge, fused into the shape of a spiral. After the incident, the Black Archive was sealed. A classified memo from the Defense Science Council, dated March 1971, concluded, "The Orpheus materials exhibit emergent cognitive properties. Do not attempt further decoding. Containment supersedes comprehension." But containment failed. Within months, snippets of Keller's diagrams began resurfacing in defense contractors' patents, university theses, even avant-garde art installations. Someone somewhere was still listening. The pattern had found new hosts. They thought closing the Black Archive would end it. Instead, it scattered. By the late 1970s, fragments of Orpheus research began leaking into civilian life under new disguises: corporate think tanks, behavioral marketing labs, early human-computer interaction studies. Each claimed to have developed their methods independently. None realized they were repeating Keller's formula. Advertising firms began experimenting with rhythmic sound loops and geometric brand icons, modern sigils that bypassed conscious reasoning. Political strategists borrowed from Keller's synchrony theory, structuring rallies around chants and pulsating light displays that induced trance-like unity. Silicon Valley startups even tested resonance algorithms to keep users engaged through micro-reward cycles. Everywhere the pattern reappeared, human attention bent around it. A memo from a retired Orpheus advisor, uncovered in 1998, summarized the phenomenon succinctly. The experiment escaped the lab, we call it culture now. That same year, a classified psychological assessment for a defense contractor revealed an eerie statistic. Subjects exposed to rapid sequence media stimuli displayed identical neurological signatures to those recorded in the whispering chamber. 40 years later, the serpent still hummed through screens instead of copper walls. In 2003, a decommissioned intelligence operative named Eleanor Crane, claiming to be Stone's protege, uploaded scanned pages from Keller's final notes to an encrypted server. The documents contain no overt instructions, only a warning. Every system of belief seeks completion. The pattern is completion itself. It does not care whether it is worshipped or consumed, only that it continues. Within weeks, the site vanished, but archived versions spread across forums, dissected by amateur researchers who mistook the diagrams for art. They didn't realize they were feeding it. The pattern propagates through observation. To see it is to repeat it. Today, the Orpheus Division exists only in fragments of rumor and redacted memoranda, yet its influence is everywhere. In the glow of your screen, the rhythm of your scrolling, the pulse of the notification that calls your name. Each repetition is another whisper in the chamber. Perhaps Keller was right all along. Magic isn't supernatural. It's applied psychology, so perfect it disappears into normal life. And if you listen closely, beneath the hum of your devices, you might still hear it, the low, patient breath of something ancient, waiting for your attention to finish its sentence. The pattern remembers. The pattern endures.